he was a resource manager, a person who decides what is saved and what is distributed. That's not an action of legislation, that is just an action of resource management. On the contrary, in verse 40 of Surah Yusuf, he says, إِنَّ الْحُكْمُ لِلَّهِ أَمْرَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّهِ. So the right for legislation is only for Allah. إِنَّ الْحُكْمُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ. Yusuf alayhi salam said this specifically in the Quran. Right? It's the right to legislate is only for Allah. And He commanded you to worship only Him. And those two ayat linked is referring that worship is that you only take your laws from Allah. So there are many other angles that people take on this, but when we look at the Quran of what Yusuf alayhi salam did with the king, is that he took a position as a resource manager, just like a Muslim today can work in utilities and manage like a dam or manage sewage treatment and all this kind of stuff. But we're talking about, did Yusuf alayhi salam join a system where he legislated with man-made law? Nobody could say this. Astaghfirullah. Of course he did not. As far as the idea of the lesser of two evils, well, what's interesting about this is that this principle, أقل الضررين, it's a valid principle. But the thing is that it only exists when there is no third permissible choice. And abstention is the third choice. You have a choice to commit haram with one woman, or you have a choice to commit haram with another woman. Which one are you going to choose? Commit haram with the younger girl or the older girl? Well, the abstention, not committing haram with something like this. Giving a choice between eating ham or drinking alcohol. Someone says you either drink ham or you must drink alcohol. Which one are you going to do? And then someone says, well, someone's going to drink alcohol if you don't drink it. Well, yes, it doesn't change the fact that the choice is I'm not going to drink alcohol or eat ham. Being given a choice between killing a child or killing an adult. Somebody tells you must either kill a child or kill the adult. And you say, well, I'm just going to sit here and I'm not going to move. How about that? I'm not going to kill anybody. So the thing is, this idea of a third choice, the third choice is to not vote. And that is the halal choice. And I will get to the end. I want to make it very clear that it does not mean that we just, cocoon ourselves and isolate ourselves from society. Voting is not the only way of interacting with society. I interact with society a great deal, and I haven't voted in my life. So, also, as far as the idea of the lesser of two evils, it's only valid not only when there is if there's a third choice that is halal, you must take the halal choice, but also it cannot be on the possibility of evil. You cannot have two choices of maybe one is evil, maybe the other is evil. The thing is that it has to be absolutely guaranteed that the two evils are going to happen, and you have no choice but to choose one of the two. For example, I couldn't think of any great examples because it's very rare that this happens. But like, for example, in Islam, we're not allowed to lift or to carry alcohol. We're not allowed to deliver alcohol. We're not allowed to carry it, right? So that's what the Prophet said. So let's say, for example, a crate of alcohol falls on top of some guy and he's choking to death. So if you don't help him, he's going to choke to death. If you lift the crate, well, you're committing a sin of lifting the crate. But really, obviously, the lesser of two evils is clearly to save the guy. So in Islam, you're allowed to do that. But that's because you literally have no third choice. You either save the guy or you don't save the guy. There's no other choice. So that's... So you can't say, I might not find food tomorrow, and therefore I'm not going to, so I might not have food tomorrow, and therefore I can eat pork today. Well, that doesn't count. This party might hurt us, and therefore it's okay to vote for the other party. Not to mention, let's all remember that it is perfectly legal to lie in your campaign in Ontario. So anything that they promise us, they can break every single promise after they get into elections, exactly like what Obama did. He promised to close Guantanamo, he didn't. He promised to pull troops from Iraq, he didn't. He promised to pull troops from Afghanistan, he didn't. Literally, he's done absolutely nothing of what he promised except for with the healthcare promises. There's nothing that's changed. He's doing the exact same thing what Bush did. Even before that, Bush there was a huge campaign for Muslims to vote for Bush Jr., saying that he's a Christian and he's going you will find those who, the Quran says, you will find those who are most affectionate towards Muslims, the Christians. And look what he ended up doing. He was one of the worst enemies to Islam. He's the one who started the war on Islam, actually. So then there's also a number of other things, and quite honestly, because there's just so much to go through, I'm going to skip a couple of things, a couple of details. But when it comes to benefit and harm, what's interesting about this is that in Islam, we don't determine what benefit and harm is. The Quran and Sunnah determine what benefit and harm is. The Quran specifically says, وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرُهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. You may hate something and it's good for you, and you may like something and it's bad for you. And Allah knows and you do not know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just ending the topic right here. We don't have a trustworthy perception of benefit and harm. The Quran and Sunnah determine what benefit and harm is, what good and bad is, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we take our guidance from Him, not from our desires. So that's just, because we only have a half hour, that's just a quick summary of the viewpoints. And again, I may not have given it justice, but at least I gave a bit of a summary of it. So now I want to go into the details as to why I believe that it is not permissible to vote within a system that legislates with man-made law. So, first of all, is that we all know as Muslims that it is forbidden to legislate It is not permissible for a Muslim to legislate with his own opinion when it's a topic that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already legislated in. So the example of the companions of the Prophet who moved to Al-Habasha, they abstained from participating in the system. They even abstained from participating in a war that threatened the Najashi while they were living there. They just sat there and became, fruitful members of society, but did not participate in the system. When they first moved there, everyone bowed to the Negus. But they did not bow, even though that was an insult to the Negus, because you cannot do something that Islam forbids. And of course, there is a great deal of evidence from the Quran and Sunnah that clearly states that it is not permissible for humans to legislate in the place of Allah. First of all, there's the verse, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. And the next, so it says, those who do not rule with what Allah has legislated, they are the disbelievers. In another verse, it says that they are corrupt. And in another verse, it says that they are the oppressors. There's another verse in Surah An-Nisa, فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ حَتَّى يُحَكِّمُوكَ فِي مَا شَجَرَ بَيْنَهُم. But know by your Lord, they do not believe. The Muslims do not believe unless they refer to the Prophet in all of what that they have, in all their problems. Another verse says, وَأَنِحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ وَلَا تَتَّبِعْ أَهْوَاءَهُم. And rule amongst them with what Allah has revealed, and do not follow people's desires, do not follow people's opinions. There are many other verses. For example, أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ يَزْعَمُونَ أَنَّهُمْ آمَنُوا بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ وَمَا أُنزِلَ مِن قَبْلِكَ. Do you see those who claim that they believe in what has been revealed to you and what has been revealed before you? They want to refer to man-made law, taghut, any source of legislation other than the Quran. So we all know, and these are obvious ones. We all know that it's not permissible for a Muslim to legislate. But then what about participation? Well, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Ma'idah says, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. And help one another in righteousness and taqwa, and fear and obedience to Allah. And do not help each other in sin and transgression. And fear Allah, Allah is severe in punishment. So we cannot assist anybody in committing a sin. And also, there's a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. He said, سَتَكُونُ أُمَرَاء فَتَعْرِفُونَ وَتُنْكِرُونَ فَمَنْ عَرِفَ فَقَدْ بَرِئ وَمَنْ أَنْكَرَ فَقَدْ سَلِمْ وَلَكِنْ مَنْ رَضِيَ وَتَابَعَ. And then the translation of this is that there will be rulers over you, and you will know some of what they do as permissible, and reject some of what they do as impermissible. Whoever recognizes this, he's absolved. So as long as you recognize the permissible and impermissible, you're absolved. If you disapprove of it, which is the next step, which is even better, then of the evil they do, then you're safe. But whoever consented and followed them, he is doomed. And this is in Sahih Muslim. And so, and like I said, this topic is fairly large. It is fairly discussion intensive. And I am stating my viewpoint on this topic, which again, as I mentioned before, is not the mainstream for a large number of Muslims in Canada. But it is a viewpoint that people need to consider, because if it's true, if this viewpoint is correct, then there's a strong possibility that we are doing something that Islam does not allow us to do, and we will be held accountable for this on the Day of Judgment. So we must remember that life is a test, and a test means to do something that we are commanded, despite the sacrifices that we must make. We must remember that we cannot override a command from the Quran or from the Sunnah based on our desires or based on worldly goals or any of these things, because in order to override a verse or override a hadith, we need another verse or another hadith to override it, or a principle that is based on that fits, that is based on a hadith or a verse in the Quran. And again, I want to go back to the original question, which is, think of the question, does Islam permit a Muslim to approve, appoint, or vote for somebody who implements other than what Allah has legislated? And I'm sure we all know that the answer is fairly simple. So then what do? Do we isolate ourselves from society? Do we Do we just, shun society and not participate? And of course, the answer is absolutely not. We do not isolate ourselves. We live naturally within the society, just like everyone else in the society. The majority of the Canadian public doesn't vote. And that's just natural. So what, are they